In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to replace the lower control arms in your F-Series BMW. I'm working on a 4 Series, but it's also going to be the same process for 3 Series, 2 Series, and a lot of other different models that share this same suspension design. I'm replacing it with an upgraded component from SPL Parts, but the OEM replacement components will pretty much follow the exact same process, just have different tightening specifications. So these are the control arms I bought. They're made by SPL Parts, and just looking at them, they're really good quality, really easy and simple to understand. On this side, you have bearings that mount to the subframe, and then on this side, you have additional bearings, and when paired with these bolts, you put the bolt through that hole, and it creates your ball joint that attaches to the knuckle. Then you also have this extra attachment point so that your headlight arm, the arm that controls the aim of your headlights, can be attached to it as well, and you can maintain that functionality. So really nice piece. You can tell they put a lot of effort into designing it well, especially with the hole in the middle to get some additional weight savings. And I have a lot of confidence in it because when I contacted SPL about it after they made and released the M3 arms, they did tell me that they were making one specific for the regular 2, 3, and 4 series, and that they weren't releasing it yet because they were doing track testing. For me, that gave me all the confidence I needed because I knew that they were actually using the part and putting it through its paces and not just releasing something that worked. So I waited for it to be released and went ahead and ordered it from Bimmerworld. They had great shipping prices, and they also ship all of their parts with gummy bears. So again, that's all the motivation I needed to order from them. But this part has a lot of benefits. First of all, like I said, the hole in the middle and the other things they did to help make it lighter than stock is really important. When your suspension is moving, you want your tires to be in contact with the ground as often as possible, and your control arms are sprung mass. So anything that you reduce weight on sprung mass will net a significant improvement in handling. So it's not a big weight savings for like the overall car, but it'll make your springs respond more quickly. It'll respond more quickly over bumps. It'll keep the tires in contact with the ground more often and just make everything in your suspension work better. Another nice feature is this nut right here is attached to a threaded rod that goes through the control arms, and it allows you to actually extend the control arm out. So if you turn that rod, you're going to be pushing out the bottom of your wheel, and what that'll do is it'll add camber, and it'll also increase your track width. So anybody that's installed the OEM M3 control arms knows that it has a nice performance benefit. It helps reduce understeer, but it's a set length. So you're just kind of adding like half a degree or 1 degree of camber no matter what you're starting with. This way you can set it to your specific camber that you want, and you can also make sure that it's even from side to side, which is nice. The third thing, and the main reason I bought it, is roll center correction, and I'll show more on the car, but these spacers, or these little washers, are what allow you to adjust the roll center. So you're adjusting that control arm angle and making sure that your roll center is as high as possible to get it closer to your center of gravity. The only downside to this is it's not really made for street cars. With these exposed bearings, you have chances of getting dirt in there, and over time it'll wear. So it can begin to make knocking noises. It can increase your NVH in the car. It just kind of depends on your driving conditions. Like if you drive in a lot of gravel, dusty areas, things like that, they can begin to wear. The good thing is SPL releases part numbers for all of their components. So this is like an example of what you'll get from them for installation instructions, and it shows all the part numbers. So if you need to replace just the bearings or really anything, like if you strip out a bolt and want to replace it, you can buy the replacement components. So for me, this is kind of like my camber plates. I'm playing it by ear because talking to them, they said it should last a really long time. But if after 30,000 miles or something, it begins making noise, it begins knocking a little bit, it won't necessarily hurt the performance, but from an NVH standpoint, that's not desirable. So you can order replacement components and just replace the bearings if you need to. So just kind of something else that'll need to be monitored and maintained. This isn't something that's for everybody. It's definitely not a common mod. Most people will just slap some coilovers on their car and call it a day. I do have KWV1s, and as you can see, I am lowered a lot, which is what kind of prompted me to start working on the suspension geometry. But what we'll do now is take the wheel off, and I'll show you some of the suspension components and how it all works. And then I'll show you guys quickly how to install it. So now I have the wheel removed. You can see my brakes, my coilovers, and everything else inside the fenders. I'll show you guys the issues that I'm having and kind of talk about why our suspension setup sucks. But these marks that you see on my fenders are from the tires rubbing. And so basically, like any of these pieces that stick out a little bit get some tire rub under the suspension being fully compressed. And my tires are an inch wider than stock and a slightly lower offset than stock. So it's kind of just an issue that I have to deal with. I added some camber with my camber plates to help eliminate the issue, but I still have some spots that get some rubbing. And the issue is that we have this McPherson strut suspension. And if you look up some videos on YouTube, you can see exactly how it works. But if we kind of get under here, you can see the control arm that we're going to replace. And then the coilovers, those are pretty much what control our camber and alignment of the car. And so you want this arm to be as close to horizontal as possible. And that helps it maintain the correct suspension geometry when going around turns. But on my car, when it's fully lowered, the actual arm has like a negative angle. And I'll show a picture of it. So that's really bad. You don't want like the angle from your subframe up to your wheel to go up like that. You want it to be pointed down like this or horizontal. Once it starts going above horizontal and getting up into this kind of angle, you begin losing camber or even going into positive camber. And I'll show a picture of what that looks like when a car is going around a heavy turn. So again, obviously, that's bad, but BMW went with this suspension design because it's cheaper and easier to be modular across a lot of different platforms. But cars that have dual A arms will have much better performance when going around turns because they increase in camber when going around them, not losing camber or going to positive camber like we do. So with that in mind, I'm going to replace this control arm, add in the spacers to improve my control arm angle. That'll raise my roll center above ground. Again, you can look up a lot of videos about the roll center, but by bringing it up above ground and closer to my center of gravity, it'll help reduce how much the car actually wants to roll when going around turns. And then also, hopefully, when my suspension is under full compression, it won't go to as much positive camber, and it'll help the wheels camber in a little bit more so they won't rub when the suspension's fully compressed. So, you know, I kind of want to be low, but I also want to have wide tires so that I can have as much grip as possible, and this should help me get closer to having the best of both worlds. So here we have the control arm removed, and the easiest way to access it is remove this under panel, or at least lower it, so that you can get to the bolts where it's attached to the subframe. And those are an 18mm bolt and an 18mm nut, so back those off. And then the one that's mounted here, the ball joint, is a 21mm nut, or you can use a 13/16 box wrench, is what I used. So take that off. What you're going to notice while you're removing it is that it's going to start spinning because it's a ball joint. So you need a T40 to go into the actual middle. And what you want to do is put your box wrench on the nut and put your T40 in here to be a counter hold so that you can back it off the rest of the way. And if any of this rust is an indicator, I've got 13,000 miles on the car now. So any of you guys with higher miles, just be prepared with your PB blaster and stuff because it might be a battle to get it off. For me, it came off pretty clean, but yeah, this is after 13,000 miles. That's how much rust is on it. So as I was getting ready to install this, I noticed a couple things that I just wanted to highlight. when I contacted SPL, they told me there were a couple things they were doing to help make it better for street cars, and it still might need a little additional maintenance, but it's kind of nice to see what they did. So sandwiched between these two is like a little rubber washer to help isolate this bearing, and that's really nice just to help keep the noise down and make it a little more streetable. Also, they told me that this was coated or had like a self-cleaning feature, and you can see around it, that's where the Teflon is. So that's why it doesn't really need a boot like other bearings that you get from the OEM to keep dust out. They actually described it as self-cleaning, and I didn't fully understand what they meant, but now that I'm looking at it, I understand that basically while it moves around, that Teflon helps get any dirt off of it. So it just helps it last longer, prevents it from getting noisy as quicker, and helps preserve some of the NVH that you'll have in initial install. So it's kind of nice to see those little details. It's not just some Chinese bearings that they installed. They actually went through the extra time to make sure it's self-cleaning and help make sure it reduces noise. So definitely nice to see. So here's a comparison between the two control arms. Stock is at the top and the aftermarket one's on the bottom. They come out of the box about the same length as the stock one, which is nice because I didn't want to add any camber, so I'm actually keeping it the same. But if you want to install it and then get an alignment later, you want it to be as close to the same length as possible so that you can drive to the alignment shop and then get it adjusted there. But other than that, you know, it's pretty much the same or similar design. At this point, you kind of have to assemble it. So you're going to put the bolt into the bottom and then however many washers you want. And then this standoff is what actually goes into the bottom of the knuckle. And then on top of it, you have another washer and the actual nut to secure it. And then I'll show a quick comparison between the attachment points. Not super scientific, but you can see the standoff is a little bit higher than this one on the stock arm, and that's what helps correct your roll center. So if you don't have any washers, it should make it the same as stock, but those will add additional travel to the control arm to help correct that angle and raise your raise your roll center. So it's a pretty good option. I haven't seen anything else on the market like it for the F30, so I do recommend it for anybody that's lowered their car and want to try to correct their suspension geometry. And then what you're going to do is attach this one to the knuckle with 110 foot-pounds of torque, and at this point you're going to connect it to the subframe at 74 pounds. And this is what it looks like installed. So what I did, I jacked it up to get it as close to level as I could. Unfortunately, my jack doesn't go high enough, but you want to get it up to a point where it's close to the normal position and then torque everything down. And then I popped the headlight aiming adjuster arm. I needed a little WD-40 to get it on there, but that worked. And then also, don't forget these little blue bolts at the top. They don't get torqued down very tight, but make sure they are tight because you don't want those backing out either. I think it's like 150 inch-pounds, which translates to like 12 foot-pounds. So not a lot of torque, but don't leave them loose. So now you've installed your control arms, your camber curve is better, your roll center is higher, and everything feels a lot better from just a front-end traction point of view. But now you've induced a new issue, and it's kind of one of those things where they say modifying your car is a slippery slope, especially with suspension. That's very true. So what you can see right here is the control arm you just replaced, and then this is your tie rod, and your tie rod controls your steering. What you see right now is that the two angles are different. The control arm is at like a steeper angle than the tie rod, and what that can do is create an issue called bump steer. So when you go over bumps and the wheel goes up and down, your tie rod is at a different angle than your control arm, and as they go up and down, they can kind of twist the wheel. So it's literally when you go over bumps, it can steer the car and turn it a little to the left or right. It's not super violent or dangerous if you just install the control arms, but to completely neutralize your handling and neutralize your steering feel, you're going to want to replace your outer tie rods and correct that. So they have a solution made by SPL. This is their bump steer kit, which replaces the tie rod. It adds the same style spacers to where it attaches at the knuckle, and that way you can correct the angle. So you can kind of see, these are the stock ones that I haven't replaced yet, and you can see, focus, you can see they're pretty much parallel. So that's the goal. You want to bring it back to a parallel position to prevent bump steer when you're going down the road. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty much the same design. You've got your tie rod at the bottom and a bolt that goes through the bearing and a couple spacers to get it to the correct angle. So this is what we're installing next. All right, so now we have a good look at the tie rod we're about to remove. And this is another really simple installation and removal process. First, you have a nut on top. This is either 21mm or 13/16 box wrench to get it off. And if you need to, which you probably will, there's a counter hole. You can put a T45 in here to hold it in place while you're twisting it so that the ball joint doesn't spin as well. And then on the bottom, you have a T50 that you want to remove this. And after you get that off, you'll be able to untwist the tie rod off of the inner tie rod. So if you need to also, there's a spot right here you can put a wrench and clamp down on it just so that the inner tie rod doesn't spin with it. Another thing, just make sure that you mark how many threads are here, or put like tape or something so that you know where to stop when you're installing the SPL tie rod. So these are the two outer tie rods compared. The stock one is on the top and the aftermarket one on the bottom. When you assemble the aftermarket one, you're going to put the bolt in the bottom and then install these spacers, then the tapered washer that actually fits into the knuckle, and then on top you have another washer and the nut that torques it down. And you can see they're pretty much the same length, which is awesome. It makes it easy to set up and you don't have to worry a whole lot about your toe going out of whack if you mark the inner tie rod properly. Also, there are 2 points of adjustment on this one. So this one, you're going to loosen and twist the inner tie rod like a normal alignment to correct your toe. But if you get to like the very extent of your inner tie rod where you can't adjust it anymore, so you've got like really long control arms or something else in your suspension that requires additional adjustment, they do have this side where you can thread out this side of the rod as well. It's not recommended because it's not made to hold a big load, but they kind of have that adjustment there in case you need it. Now I've got the tie rod removed and I actually see some rust on here. So I'm going to clean that up, just hit it with a wire brush real quick, and then reinstall the new tie rod. Now here they are both installed. You can see how much closer to parallel they are, so it should ride a lot more neutral. So at this point you're done. What I did before putting my wheels on, I put a jack underneath the control arms and jacked it up and down to kind of put it through the suspension travel. And I also twisted it like you were turning the wheel and just made sure that none of the control arms or bearings were binding. Nothing was hitting like the end links and the other suspension components. And you're basically just checking for clearance on everything. So after you do that and everything looks good, put your wheel on, drop the car down, and if you want to make sure your car is safe to take to the alignment shop, you can just kind of look at it head on. And with the steering wheel straight, your wheel should be pretty close to straight. So if there's an obvious bias, like it looks like the wheel is turning, then you can adjust the toe yourself just to get it to a point where it's good enough to drive down the road. It might not be perfectly straight, but you don't want it looking really wonky. And then take it to go get an alignment. What I'm actually doing is my own alignment using the string method. That's this contraption you kind of see here. So you set up some strings and do some measurements and you can align your car yourself. It's just easier and cheaper for me since I mess with my suspension a lot. And I'm not quite done. I still have other ideas for things I want to do to see if it improves the feel of the car. So I use the string method to do my own alignments at home. If anybody's interested in seeing how I do that, let me know and I can make a video about it too, but there are plenty of other videos on YouTube about alignments and using the string method, so you can look those up. Anyway, at this point you're done, so if there are any questions or other thoughts, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Thanks for watching.